about this Maurice Bishop, who was, it turned out, the secret supervisor and director of all Veciana's anti-Castro activities. Bishop was the man who had suggested the founding of Alpha 66. Bishop was the man who guided its overall strategy. Shortly, I will show... Oh, no, skip that. Here we go. Fascinated by what he was hearing, Fonzie realized that Veciana was talking about the CIA and, quote, likely involvement in two Castro assassination attempts, which the agency had not admitted to the Church Committee. And then the Oswald dam broke. Gayton recalled that up to that point in the interview, there appeared to be no connection between Veciana's activities in Miami and the Kennedy assassination in Dallas. Little did Fonzie suspect what was coming next. Veciana volunteered he'd met the man named Bishop in places outside of Miami, including Dallas, and started talking about chapters of Alpha 66 he had set up around the country. Fonzie seized that opportunity to casually ask Veciana about the meeting in Dallas. Veciana replied that he'd gone to Dallas to talk to some fundraising meetings at the home of an Alpha 66 delegate there. In the ensuing conversation, Fonzie was careful not to mention Oswald's name. He didn't need to. Astonishingly, Veciana did, quote, and I never saw Oswald. Right out of the blue. And I never saw Oswald. Nobody brought up the name. And I never saw Oswald at the home where we met, unquote. As soon as Veciana breached the Oswald barrier, Gayton's antennae crackled with electricity. Gayton later observed that was the moment that the reality of what I was involved in suddenly hit. That observation was undoubtedly true for him. But Gayton's interpretation that accompanied that impression is unfortunate. Quote, I had no doubt then, and have none now, that Veciana was simply and truthfully revealing what he knew. Unfortunately for Gayton in history, Veciana had just told another lie. And it took another 38 years for the Phillips dam to break. It wasn't until 22 November 2013, 50 years to the day that President Kennedy was assassinated, that Veciana finally, this is before the Art Congress now, but privately delivered an apparent deathbed confession to Bishop had been Phillips. And that's the person to whom he gave it is not something I want to talk about. The son of a bitch. What he did. Now, it was just 13 months after Fonzie passed away. As you know, Veciana is alive today at 91, which is fine. The remainder of this presentation will lay out what really happened in 1962 and early part of 1963. Let's go to F, the first slide for this. I guess I don't have a title sheet for that. You can just leave it as it is until I give you this cued in. All right. This is a narrative that deals what I call Veciana's Big Zabala secret. 18 months ago, while trolling through the JFK documents newly released between July 2017 and April 2018, I discovered two of Antonio Veciana's biggest secrets. They were both true stories that he's never shared publicly, but they're in the files, the FBI files. They are both true. Okay, so in this section of my presentation, I'll address the discovery of one of those buried treasure chests. It contains an incredible collection of pieces that fit into the less than half completed puzzle who was behind the assassination, not who shot, who was behind the assassination of President Kennedy. And that's what I'm actually researching. I don't have time to do. There's a lot of people that are researching Dealey Plaza and all that stuff, so I'm taking care of something else. I want to know who did it and how they got away with it. Okay, and this is pertinent. Before the 2017-2018 release, the details revealed by these important pieces I'm talking about were obscured behind the blackened lines of a redactor. The new unredacted FBI files exposed the full story of Veciana's relationship with his closest friend, Felix Zabala. This epic tale was reported for the first time in Chapter 11 of my Volume 3, Into the Storm. I'm a whole lot further downstream than I was when that came out. The post-prison saga of Veciana's desperate use of his best friend is more fully expanded and developed in my forthcoming volume, Armageddon. I share some of that work with you today along with a few words of caution. I refer here to the current context for this 43-year-old lost chapter of history. The present setting is still dominated by the enormous weight that has long been conferred by many researchers on Vesiana's alleged shiny 63 object. 1963 meeting with Lee Harvey Oswald and Nate Phillips in Dallas. In many quarters, that allegation has become an orthodoxy. As a result, the details of Vesiana's big Zabala secret are extraordinarily sensitive. It's like things you don't discuss at the dinner table, you know? If you're going to upset people, that's where we are. And I predict that they will unavoidably remain sensitive for some time to come. That's the nature of orthodoxies. Yet these precious pieces of information will inevitably take their proper place in the puzzle of who was behind the assassination of President Kennedy. And alas, we live in a time when the completion of that puzzle is taking place at a glacial rate of progress. Very slow. With that stipulation, I'll now push ahead. Felix Zabala Mas was much more than a close friend of Vesiana. Other than his wife and children, there was no one in the world closer to Vesiana than Felix Zabala. Vesiana was the godfather to Zabala's son. Like Vesiana, Zabala had been a banker in Havana and a member of the anti-Castro resistance. He had fled to the United States and settled in San Juan, Puerto Rico, where he became a boxing promoter and a charter member of Vesiana's Alpha 66. Crucially, for history, Zabala was also an FBI informant. He told the Bureau that Vesiana was, quote, like my own brother, unquote, and that they were business partners. When Vesiana stayed in Puerto Rico, he lived in Zabala's home. Zabala remained loyal to Vesiana through thick and thin. He even participated in Vesiana's alleged abortive attempt to assassinate Castro in Chile in November 1971. That alleged assassination attempt took place during Vesiana's work for the U.S. Agency for International Development in La Paz, Bolivia. All the above history that I just gave you between Vesiana and Zabala preceded Vesiana's 17 July 1973 arrest in Miami for cocaine trafficking. The government's case laid out a startling scenario of the smuggling. He maintains his innocence, by the way. I've read the entire transcript that we have in the trial. It's absolutely startling and fascinating. And I'll tell you what, I'm so amazed that no one, no author, no researcher, no journalist, newspaper reporter, all these years has pulled up these files. You can read what happened during the trial, during the appeal, and all the case law that goes along with this stuff. It's all there to look at, and it really is astonishing. The government's case laid out a startling scenario of the smuggling into the United States. This is the case against Vesiana of some 25 kilos of cocaine between August 1972 and July 1973. The litigation, conviction, sentencing, and incarceration of Vesiana lasted from then until his sudden early release from the Atlanta Penitentiary in February 1976. He was actually sentenced to two concurrent 7-year terms with I might have that in the next section. Anyway, Vesiana's freedom brought with it an overwhelming burden that forever changed his life. That yoke changed the lives of Church Committee staff investigator Fonzie and Vesiana's lifelong best friend Zabala. The net cast by the widowmaker in the assassination of Kennedy, whoever that is, concealed behind Vesiana's early release from prison, not only ensnared Fonzie, but also the Church Committee and the House Select Committee on Assassinations. Within 6 months of Vesiana's release, this expanding web of dissection ensnared Zabala and other friends of Vesiana into a nightmare of FBI, CIA, and Cuban intrigue that took them all by surprise. I'll tell you more about that shortly. In any event, they were so angry that they were drawn into this. Zabala actually had to go penetrate the Cuban intelligence to do a favor. Anyway, it was very scary, and they all got angry at him. They ratted out the whole story that it was not true, and even his best friend said he only went to Zabala said he only went to Dallas for one reason: sell narcotics. I'll show you the slide for that shortly. Anyway, I'll now show you some slides to go with everything I just told you. So we're going to go to 60. Okay. And I'm going to go through these fairly quickly. I'm going to show you. So we should be going to 60A. Uh, 61. I have it right. Okay, it's going to be 60A. That's the authentic slide. 60 alpha. That's 61. Okay, so what I'm trying to show you, I'm going to show you two versions of each one, just so you know I'm not making this stuff up. Okay, this is the real FBI interview that's involved. Okay, and the date and everything, and the RIF number if you want that, and so on. So go to the next slide. You'll see it on the next slide. This is more user friendly. Just bear with me. Okay, let's see here. Let me just check something out here. Okay. There's the date to 11/14/17 is what we're so each one I've retyped so that you can actually read it easily. Veziano was approached involved in September 1976, and so he's telling this about a year later in 77 to the FBI. FBI document right down there, released it. Well, that's not the release date. Anyway, there's a RIF number for it. He was approached by Zavala in September 1976 about the problem of being called to testify before a congressional committee. He needed to establish his public bona fides as a CIA contact agent for Bishop. He needed to backstop the Bishop Oswald meeting 1 month before the assassination of JFK as a CIA operative. This is not me talking. This is Zavala telling the FBI. That's what he was told by Veziano. Okay, what we're going to do real quick. Veziano asked Zavala to send a letter to Castro through his sister in Cuba about Veziano's role in the 1971 Chilean plot to kill Castro. The purpose of this letter was to get Castro to get all angry, go on the Radio Havana, and blast him and charge him for being a CIA agent that would be heard by everybody listening in Miami. The goal was for the public exposure to establish Veciana as a former CIA agent. This is Zabala speaking to the FBI, not John Newman speaking to you. Okay? So they're easy to read these slides when I show you. I'm just going to show you the little JPEGs if we've made some times here. So Veciana told the FBI that he trusted Zabala to deliver this message through his sister, Amalia Mas de Castro. Zabala was to say he had a falling out with Veciana over business matters and was taking revenge. Zabala was to confess his role in a Chilean plot to kill Castro to make his message more credible. If you just put these down like this, just press them. Keep going, right? Several months ago, this came out in the news. It was exactly what Veciana wanted. He went to the local news channel and to say that somebody had taken a shot at it, which somebody did. But the important thing that came out in that news story was this last one here. They just said on the news, on television, he was a CIA operative, right? Which was exactly what he needed, public exposure as a CIA agent or operative. Veciana's television appearance caused serious pain with another close friend of Veciana. We don't know his name. Bill Simpson and I are working on. We have it narrowed down to one or two guys. It might be Estevez. Anyway, it's a guy in Alpha 66, very close in Miami, very close to Veciana. His code name was Wild Stallion. That was his FBI pseudo. Wild Stallion accused Veciana. This is after he went on TV of being a publicity seeker, and he no longer wanted to maintain contact with him as he had in the past. While Stallion feels that Veciana's preoccupation with the Kennedy assassination has to do with the fact that Veciana was released from prison soon after his drug conviction. Not me, the close friend of Veciana, is telling you that. While Stallion suspects Veciana made some kind of secret deal with unknown government agents who allowed his release in exchange for his testimony implicating the CIA in the Kennedy assassination. That's not John Newman talking. That is a close friend of Antonio Veciana talking to the FBI secretly. The FBI is requested to contact the Drug Enforcement Administration to determine the reason for Veciana's early release from prison. Well, that's an interesting thing. We need to know whether DEA consulted with any other government officials concerning the fact that Veciana claimed to have pertinent knowledge concerning the Kennedy assassination. Zabala, this is another, a little bit later, 6 months later, another interview with the FBI. Zabala learned that Roger Redondo, another friend, an Alpha 66 friend close to Veciana, had a falling out with Veciana after that TV appearance. Zabala said Veciana is very nervous, acting strange, is unable to tell Veciana is telling the truth, and like Wild Stallion, Zabala felt Veciana was fabricating a story about the Kennedy assassination as part of the deal for early release from prison. All these different people telling the same story, not just one, but several people. It's what I call independent attestation, double independent attestation here, and it gets better. Okay, so Zabala said that at the time of the assassination, he was a very good friend with Veciana. He knew all of his activities. Zabala believed Veciana traveled to Dallas, here it comes, for no other reason than to bring drugs into the city. That's it. He didn't come to Dallas for any other reason. Zabala knows Veciana better than anyone else. Veciana never said he had anything to do with or any interest in information about the Kennedy assassination until 2 March 1976 in his home with Gaten Fonzie. So I'm going to turn it back over to you. What you need to do when you're done with it, don't has tried to just put that little line there and suppress it. Okay? I think it's legal. I don't know why it's going on. That's the section on Vessiana's big Zabala secret. Now, for the biggest part of the presentation, which is called Vessiana, slide 700 here. That's 700 yet. Vessiana's big army secret. Vessiana's work with the United States Army spanned 4 years, from 1962 to 1965. That includes 1963. The most important part of his work with the Army took place in 62 and 63. Those 2 years are the most secret periods in his life. In his 2017 autobiography, Trained to Kill, Vessiana never mentioned the Army at all, not a word. Go to 708. 700 alpha. In my previous section, I talked about the big Zabala secret. I'm not going to repeat that now for time. No, on 2 occasions, in September 76 and again in April 77, Vessiana told Zabala something very revealing about Bishop that he had never told Fonzie in any of the countless discussions during their 38-year relationship. Okay. Okay, so who just said to do a shortcut? Come on up here real quick. Let's go ahead. I'll put this fire this thing up and put a shortcut. You see if we can. Yeah. Let's get it up first in line. This. Okay, this is what we're going to put on the desktop, this sheet right here. Okay. All right. On this one here? Pin to quick access? Pin to start?
There we go.
Right, that's your desktop.
Someone go help.
Right, that's your desktop.
Yeah, I'm going to. Come on. There we go. Get up there. So when it goes somewhere, just hit the shortcut. Okay, and we don't want. Okay, so this is not a full screen, so I think what you want to do is just keep this a little smaller too, right? So that you can go to that shortcut very fast. Too many wires here, I'm going to fall down, embarrass myself. All right, here we go. 700 alpha. Let's just go to 701. What Vessiana said to Zabala in September 76. Okay, here's where I was. We missed something. I said that on two occasions, in September 76 and again in April 77, that Vessiana told Zabala something very revealing about Bishop he had never told Fonzie in the entire 38-year relationship. And what that was that Bishop was a CIA agent. He never ever told Fonzie that in all the years. But secretly, right out of the gate, he told Zabala that. So we'll go to the first slide, which is going to be 701. And there it is. It was a CIA contact. That's what he told him in September 76. Go to the next slide. 702. In April 77, he's a CIA agent. That's what he told Zabala. Let's go 703. Let's see. Yeah, 703. In the many years that Zabala has known Vessiana, and Zabala probably knows him better than anybody else, Vessiana never indicated he had anything. Okay, we already did that. Good. We did that one too. 6. I want to.
I don't think he knows the screen's blank.
Okay.
The screen is blind. Screen's blank.
We haven't had this problem at all in the room, I understand. We could go back to here. We're on 700 and something. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll try that anyway. We're getting to the end of the line here. All right, so shift forward. Yeah. We have another one, but it's in the room. You think you can reuse the other cable? Well, go get the other cable from the room. You know where it is? Okay, it's right there by that projector. Okay, so Heather's going to grab another HDMI cable. We have one in the room, and I'm going to get back to here. We're going to have to go without Slack. It's too bad. All these months, not a problem at home, not a problem when we drive run it upstairs or downstairs. All right, so under oath. Vesiana was for the House Select Committee was asked what specific plans did he make with Maurice Bishop after arriving in the United States. Answer: we decided, that's me and Bishop, that means me and Phillips, right? We decided to create an organization called Alpha 66. We founded Alpha 66. Harris, he was asked, this is what he told, the sum total of what he told Gaby Fonzie about his Army work. He mentioned one guy by the name of Harris, and that's right, his name's really Hubbard. And he said Harris wanted to make an inspection trip of one of the Alpha 66 bases, the Bahamas. He eventually got one, but Harris never helped him, never came through with the 8. And that's it. On one page in that book, there's nothing more. And there's a mountain of material on his work with the Army. And I'm going to go through that. Okay, was this the power of everything?
Yeah.
Okay. 709. This is what Vesiana said that Phillips told him to do. Was that 709? Good. In July 1962, you have to understand here that we're just a few weeks away from the 13-day crisis. It's already a crisis. Quote, and this is supposed to be what Phillips is saying to him. If Castro goes to the Soviets, if Kennedy wants to avoid war with Khrushchev, he'll have to make one with Fidel. That's where Alpha 66 comes in, but not guerrilla warfare, not with a hit and run approach. That would bring in quicker results. Go to the next slide. 710. This is what this is continuation. You don't hit Castro directly. You hit him where it hurts. You hit ships bringing goods to Cuba, but not just Cuban ships. Any ships. Russian ships. Ships from the Soviet bloc. If they do business with Cuba, they're targets. If the Soviets start rattling their sabers, JFK has to act. And then again in April '63, Kennedy's pledge never to invade Cuba and not help any anti-Castro exiles handed my homeland to the communists. So Phillips had another brainstorm. Let's lay it on his doorstep next time. Next time, make sure to hit the Russian ship hard and tell the whole world about it. Imagine that, right in the middle of the Cuban Missile Crisis, this is supposed to be the CIA, is telling Vesiana to sink Soviet ships. No, it isn't right. Of course it isn't right. Who was telling the president to sink ships and to start a war the entire year? It's in volume 3. How many people read volume 3? I thought so. Oh, okay, so it was Lemitzer, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And he got to the plains to Northwoods, right? And he wanted us to attack ourselves and blame it on Castro to create the pretext for the war. And Kennedy rebuked him in March. And so what did Lemitzer do? He said, okay, the hell with it. We don't need a pretext. It's just invade anyway, okay? He was very insubordinate with the president. And the president fired him. And he knew that he was going to be let go, and Taylor was going to replace him. And July and August, they're getting ready for their confirmation on Capitol Hill. If we can go to slide 716, I want to just do the run-up to the missile crisis real quick. And let's go to 718. Okay, good. So this was his critique against the United States policy and against the president, that Kennedy permitted Castro to take over Cuba, Castro to confiscate U.S. citizens' property, shoot American citizens, and permitted Russia to set up a base in Cuba without any protest. Next slide, 719. On 7/12/62, July the 12th, he announced his program to the FBI: kill a Russian ambassador to Cuba, blow up an SO refinery in Havana, destroy the power plant in Havana suburb, and sink a Russian ship in Havana harbor, kill a high-ranking Soviet Cuban official. 720. In July and August, plans for these raids were done secretly for security purposes. Members were discouraged by apparent lack of action. We're on the wrong with 720. Let's just go to 721. Got to speed up here. So one of the interesting things when you look at all the offers that Alpha 66 is making is what the CIA is doing about it. Early in September, the Task Force W, which was the Cuban section of CIA, the chief is William Harvey. He began sending out what I call government-wide all-point bulletins on everything that Alpha 66 was doing. And then he was asking all agencies to report anything they had on Alpha 66. In particular, he directed the CIA stations in San Juan, Puerto Rico, and Panama City that they should check with their local OBDEX guys. You know what OBDEX is? United States Army. That's who they are. To discover Alpha 66 intentions. Now, why do you think he'd ask the Army for what Alpha 66 was up to? Let's go to 722. Harvey realized the CIA had a big problem. Alpha 66 was out of control. Army seemed to know about Alpha 60 plans before the raids, before the CIA did. The Vesiana had jumped ship. He was working for the Army instead of the CIA. We're going to go to 722 real quick. I'm going to just do this from the slides. I don't have time for the narrative, I'm sorry. So now we've got, we're approaching as the run-up, we get closer and closer to the Cuban Missile Crisis itself. This is the time that Lemitzer is rebuked. That's slide 723. If you've never seen a picture of him, there he is. And go to 724. Harvey he didn't seem to care very much. He wasn't trying to get Veciana under control, which he should do. So, and there's reasons why he's not doing anything about it. The only thing that really bothers him, though, is that Kennedy is really upset about it. He knows that Kennedy is upset, and specifically says so in the National Security Council meetings. At this time, I have to expand why temporarily, because I'm really narrowly focused now on this Veciana story and who he's working for and all that. But Harvey in the CIA, just like Lansdale, who's involved, you're going to see Lansdale's role expand dramatically here in a second with the Alpha 66 Veciana. But Lansdale is in charge of the Mongoose program, of the anti-Castro program that the Kennedys put together in 1962. And he's not in the CIA. He's got a big job called the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Special Operations. He's the chief of that, right? Way up there, and the head of Mongoose. He's the operations officer for Mongoose. Harvey's the opso for Mongoose for the CIA. Those are two very important guys. And what Harvey's up to at this time is the defection of Orlando Cabela's Acades and Lash. Okay? And they're taking them all over Scandinavia and all over Europe, and they're giving them plastique and training him. He wants a rifle with a scope. They won't give him one. They will not give this man a rifle and a scope because he wants to kill Kennedy. He wants to kill Castro. Now, most people who are in the anti-Castro frame of mind want Castro dead, whether they're in the CIA or the Pentagon or anyplace else. There's a real small group of people, and one of them is William Harvey, who realizes that Castro's more valuable alive than dead. Because the cover, as you may know, and may figure it out at some point, is that Castro has to be alive to take the blame. Oswald is supposed to be a Castro KGB guy, and so if Castro was behind, and the Kremlin was behind the assassination of President Kennedy, it wouldn't look very good if Castro was already dead, would it? But it requires that you have that frame of reference, a conspiratorial frame of reference, in order to say, no, don't let him have a rifle and a scope. You can have everything else you want. They can give him a little poison pen and all that kind of thing. Not give him anything to shoot with. So my point is, Harvey's acting a little bit strange by not controlling, not getting his hands around Veciana when the president's demanding it, and at the same time involved in the recruitment of Orlando Cabela and Juanita Castro, by the way, at the same time, and other things which we don't have time to talk about. But at 725, initial contact with the Army was formally established in a covert channel, not down in Puerto Rico where they were working, where the officers were working, but in Miami by a guy named Funtner. Funtner reported that Alpha 66 refused to work with the CIA and desired to work with the U.S. military. This is from the Assistant Chief of Staff, actually is Army Intelligence, that's their headquarters in the Pentagon, and this is a document about that. And then we have what he's actually doing with the CIA. There is a passive reporting channel in New York. It's the contact's office. It's not an operational office. And they can only receive information. It's actually sent things to the CIA through that office, which, if we go to 726, is that up there? So prior to Isabella raid, which we need to talk about, it's a very important raid, a Russian ship. Alpha 66 stole $600 worth of explosives from the CIA. And then, in all these attempts where the CIA tries to learn about what their plans are, they talk to the CIA, they tell them false stuff. Right? So I want to know, if he's really working for the CIA, how come he steals from them, lies to them, and boasts about it to the Army? Doesn't make very much sense. So there were 3 raids, Alpha 66 raids, before the 13-day crisis itself. The first one, 738, was closer southeast of Havana. It was they fired 60 rounds into a British freighter, the Newman, and a Cuban ship. And with the second one, would be slide 739, was a raid against the Soviet ship at La Isabela, it's not in Puerto Rico, that's wrong. There's 2 La Isabelas. I found out that the one is in Las Vegas, the one we're talking about, which is northern Cuba. And it were 2 frogmen swam in with mines to stick on the side of the Soviet ship, and unfortunately they got sucked under the ship. They lived, but the ship They can go down, so they went ashore and they shot up some Russians and grabbed their rifles and ammunition. And that became very important to Lansdale and to Axie later on to test Funtner's bona fides, to see if he could actually provide that kind of ordnance, Soviet ordnance and information. The last raid before the 13-day crisis, 740 is the slide, was a distillery in Cardenes in Montanas province. And there was a fight and so on. But anyway, that's it. There were 3 attacks before the Cuban Missile Crisis. And if we go to slide 756, then this happened. The U-2 photographed the Soviet missiles in Cuba on the 14th of October, 1962. You know, they didn't tell the president about it for 2 days. It was a 48-hour period between the discovery of the missiles and the informing of the presidents. In that 48-hour period, a flurry of messages and memos went back and forth inside the top echelon of the Army intelligence in the Pentagon and General Lansdale. There was also a secret merger with Alpha 66 and Second National Front of Escambray. That's an old establishment that had been around with Castro, helping him way back in the day, that turned against him after Castro took power. But the reason for merging Alpha 66 and Second Front was to create an opportunity for the Army officers on the ground in Puerto Rico that were going to work with him to pretend they weren't working with Alpha 66. They could say they were only working with Second Front, and that will become important when, after Veciana meets Fonzie, the church committee starts deposing people about what the hell's going on and who Veciana was working for. So it was a device. Anyway, this is 757. I should have had the slide up. That's what I just briefed you on right there. Let's go to 758. So here's an example, 10/15/62. This is the day after the discovery of the missiles, but the day before they told Kennedy about it. Major Swofford at Axie headquarters in the Pentagon makes these recommendations to General Phipps, the Axie chief himself. They want to make it explicitly clear that they're very interested in using Alpha 66. They want to clarify the ramifications of further use. They want to exploit Alpha 66. They want to contact the Office of Naval Intelligence to help them get information about these frogmen for what they call underwater technology, Soviet UDT, underwater demolition technology. Thank you. And utilization by General Lansdale's group be investigated. And go to 759, please. Same day, James Jordan Funtner is in contact. That Funtner, this is the team in Miami. He's the only one with entree at the highest levels. Alpha 6, okay, we know about the Ray. Go to the next one. Good, okay, so Major Swofford said that, oh yeah, this is really, really, really important. This is back on the 15th. And so what he's saying is, and all these recommendations he's making, the one thing he wants to point out is, don't tell the CIA. Because if you do, they're going to ask to take over the operation. And they're going to do what the president's been asking them to do. So no more sinking Russian ships. Okay? Then the exact same thing is going to happen. I may not have time to get to it, but on 1 November, there's a big meeting in the Pentagon with several generals and a bunch of colonels, the Axie ones and Lansdale's guys, and they all bring it up. Some of these generals say, shouldn't we tell the CIA? And Lansdale says, no, do not tell the CIA. They'll take over the op. He calls it the Veciana operation. 761. There's more stuff going on here on the 15th. Let's go. That's enough. So here, 762 is the first briefing that Kennedy had. It was on the 16th. It was in the morning. It didn't last very long because He didn't want anybody to know. He didn't, especially want Moscow to know that that the missiles had been discovered. So he went through the entire day with his normal schedule. And then 763. Yeah, I'm going to go into the Q&A, and we talked about this yesterday. You all mind if I just talk about 10 minutes longer than usual? Is that okay with everybody? I was told to ask you that.
Yes.
Okay. All right, thank you. The second, slide 763, is the second briefing of the president, and it took place in the evening. And it was long. It was a transcript of it. It was very, very interesting. I don't have time to go into it. But in between the morning and the evening, guess what? A ton of stuff was going back and forth about Vessian and Alpha 66 inside the Pentagon. Go to 764. Big memo here by Colonel Boucher from AXI to Lansdale personally. And then the next one, 765, a debrief they want to do on the Alpha 66 Frogmen. They want to explore purchase the Soviet equipment from Alpha 66. Anyway, they're not going to do anything until Lansdale says approves everything. That's the bottom line of this slide here. Go to 766. There is a working agreement between Alpha 66 and the CIA. It's not stated. The CIA is constantly asking for info but giving no assistance. But here's again, and this is from another source, where they say, of course, anything he tells that office in New York is a lie. 767, please, is on the 25th. I don't have my narrative, so I'm just doing this from memory. This is when Kennedy actually goes on television and announces to the world what they're going to do. I'm going to go ahead and get okay. The slide would be 767. I'm skipping, is that 767? Keep going. We're going to miss these two. This is a marginalia on it's very interesting, but I'm going to. And which one is that? 770. Okay. 770 is just a documentary proof that he is lying. He says that he goes and tells the office in New York, it's untimely. We really should be attacking Russian ships anymore in the middle of the Cuban Missile Crisis. Guess what happens the next day? They attack ships. Two boats. Next slide, I think might have that. Yeah, this raid happened the next day after they said we're not going to attack ships anymore. Told the CIA we're not going to attack ships anymore, and that's what they did. Okay, so I'm going to go to 773 real quick, and I need to ask your pay close attention here because I can't overemphasize the importance of the slides I'm going to show you right now. He admitted, Vessian admitted to having contact with only one person in the Army, Patrick Harris. His real name was Hubbard. Depending on who he spoke with, he admitted only to one meeting or several talks. Yet the truth is that he met with him all the time. And let's go ahead and take a look at the evidence for that. 770, I want to go to 773. Okay, that 73, 780, 11 slides, 773 through 780. No, it must be 783. Sorry. I was up obviously very late. So what I want to do is the meetings between Hubbard and Vessian. That's 783?
Yeah.
No. go. So 728. Okay. And so besides Vessiana saying that, his case officer, Hubbard, under oath, called to testify right after the Fonzie-Vessiana meeting in March. Schweiker figures it out. The government agency he worked for, who Bishop worked for, so the church committee wanted to know who it was. And they went and found out. You know who they found out from? They found out from the CIA, that it was the Army, and that Hubbard was the case officer. And that's the first guy. Schweiker said, "Come here, guy. You're gonna sit down here and testify." And they did. And that's what he said. Under oath, I had only one meeting, a one-time basis with Antonio Vessiana. I had no dealings at all with Alpha 66. Next slide. Really, here's the first meeting on 11/1, and it has all the stuff in there, but I'll go. Trust me, there's a meeting with a lot of people in front of other people you're looking at there. Go to the next one. That's more of the same meeting. Still the first meeting. Go to the next one. Second meeting. There he is meeting at the under the trees, a regular hangout there in Puerto Rico. Go to the next one. Next slide. Jump back. Yeah, so we should go to the third meeting. Well, that's all we have here? Okay. I don't know why. Anyway, I'm going to move forward. I have the material to show you there were 6 meetings. 6 meetings. And the 5th meeting was actually a 4-day trip where the 2 of them went on a boat together out to look at an Alpha 66 base camp in the Caribbean. How do you forget a 4-day trip on the boat out there in the middle of the Cuban Missile Crisis? We got up there now? Okay, thank you. Anyway, I think what I'm going to do now. No, it's Army. They're all Army. Okay. I will end this presentation by taking it back to where we began earlier. So Hubbard lied about it. And it's really a big deal. They had an observer. They insisted on having an observer present, and they prepped him before he took the stand, and he lied about it because it was a covert op. I have a slide it's somewhere. I put together the entire. In fact, I have it on something that you can take pictures of here in a minute with your phone on a display board of the entire AXI chart and who was working where and everything. I have all that laid out, but. I think that besides that, what we need to do is just to take a step back and understand what it is that we've established here today. The newly released documents on both sides of the Army-Vessiana relationship expose the covering up of his work with Hubbard, King, and all these other people. And Army officers were pushing him, the Pentagon was pushing him to attack Soviet ships during the nuclear-tinged crisis. That's basically what they're doing, and it's a policy the president had absolutely said no to. This is seditious. It's not just insubordinate. It's actual sedition to do that, to try and provoke a war that the president said I do not want to do, and to use Alpha 66 in a way that could not be traced back to him. That was what happened. Was they made it look like a CIA thing. But we got to go back to the beginning now, where we started earlier. See, so where we're now in 62. I've been talking the last several minutes. I'm talking about 62 and all these raids and all that stuff. So what happened in there? We have misdirection going on. He's working for the Army, but he's saying later, I was working for who? The CIA. He said, who did he say created the Alpha 66? CIA. They did everything, and we're back now seeing it wasn't that way. When did that start? 2 March 1976 with Gate and Fonzie. That's where it began. Back to the future we go now to really understand why he had to go back and suppress who he really was, who his real patron was, is he had something he had to do. He had to establish the CIA bona fides. And I took you through the Zabala caper, all that stuff he did, and what he drug his friends through. They ended up, some of them were afraid that they were going to get killed. Okay. So, about Gaten Fonzie, this is my concluding remarks. At places in his book, The Last Investigation, is slide 810 available? In his book, he I told you before where he said, I thought it was used. And it happened more than one place in the book. He was like a sixth sense, even though he was going through this long relationship, 38 years with this man. At several points, he had a feeling something else was going on that he didn't really know. But he never strung them all together and just erected like an analyst would, an alternative hypothesis to test it out. I'm sure if he had lived and seen the 2017-2018 release, Gaten Fonzie, who I knew personally was a smart guy and an honest guy, he'd have no problem. And by the way, Tony Summers is ready to change it too. And Dick Russell has too. But those people have actually seen the evidence, know, okay, well that's what happened. And we're going to have to deal with this, as a research community. Eventually, we're going to have to deal with this. Hang on, I'm just going to ask you a question at the end. So anyway, but Fonzie didn't. Let's see about where this all leads us. This misdirection. I've barely had enough time to scratch the surface of the new work I'm doing on Bessiana. My biggest problem is actually trying to link all the things that are going on with this. And that would be the Lenditzer piece, right? The chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, LeMay and Lenditzer in particular. That would be Howard Burris. Heather and I worked for a week in the LBJ library down there and watched the work of Howard Burris, who was supposed to be LBJ's military aide, and his do whatever LBJ told him to do was the other way around. He told LBJ what to do, and he took care of him every day with an amazing amount of stuff that was true, but the stuff that went to the president most of the time wasn't true. And I experienced this for the first time in my life in JFK in Vietnam, when we looked in the spring of '62, all the true order of battle stuff going to the vice president through Burris, and all the lies about the size of the Viet Cong and the operations of the field going to the president. Okay? So I thought all those years that was the only thing. But when we got into the LBJ library and we looked at everything else that Burris was reporting and everything else and compared that to what was being compared to the president, guess what we found? Same pattern. And he was being helped, by the Secretary of the National Security Council, Bromwich. Anyway, so there are other tentacles that go with this that I haven't been able to brief you about today, that I'm working on and researching on now for Volume 4. But I've chosen to narrow down this one thing, like I did with Nosenko. When you start taking away, and Halpern, 3 chapters in book, Volume 3, 3 chapters on Halpern's defamation of RFK. Okay, making up all these stories that RFK was the one who was behind the mafia plots and that sort of thing when he wasn't. So Halpern, Nosenko, Bessiana, you got a Cuban, you got an American, you got a Russian. In the future, they're all laying stuff back on the Kennedy years that the sky, you can't even see what really happened with all this deception going on. So Volume 3 ended up being, let's clean all this stuff out of the way, and now in Volume 4, I'm taking my time. It's going to be 3 years to finish this project, because now that we get rid of all this garbage, we can go back and start looking at what really happened. And it's really clear that, and this is a hypothesis, I'm not going to say it's a fact, there's a lot of people involved in the assassination, and I told you, and I've written about before what I think happened with the CIA. They weren't good at killing people, they were good at psych warfare and propaganda. The one thing they tried to kill somebody, remember how that ended up with the mob. Ended up very badly, right? So, Where this takes us is that 5-sided building on the Potomac River called the Pentagon. Okay? And I'm researching it. I'm not telling you that they are the galactic center of this universe, but they might be. And that's where the research is leading me. And I thank you very much for your time. And I'm sorry for the stuff happened here, but I think the questions that you have there. You have a question? Do we have? Yeah. Yeah.